There you go. Thanks. All right. So I'm Tom Fay. I'm your Sergeant at Arms today. So why don't we go ahead and start? Do we have any visitors with us today? Okay. What do you got?
My buddy Otis.
Mike Womack, who I'd like to also say hi to. He's relocated here from Charlotte retirement. He's class of '76. Was an RA at James.
I was.
So please say hello.
I'm proud that we're putting Zoe Carolina White, granddaughter, who lives in Toronto.
He's down here for the warm weather. Is that...
I'm proud too to have Nelson Brown back again.
Any other visiting Rotarians today? Well, I'll start with the basket and then got a few things to say about an upcoming holiday.
I got you today.
All right, well, I thought in order
No, you don't know.
to kind of get Alan Young's event in 2 weeks off to a start, I would maybe tell you a little bit more about Valentine's Day. Is that guy away? Okay. So what's the real story behind St. Valentine's Day? Well, the holiday is based, like many, in Roman roots, including the festival of Lupercalia and Christian martyrs. While commonly associated with romantic love, the day's origins are deeply rooted in the history of the Catholic Church, reflecting faith, love, and the legacy of St. Valentine. Of course, there's a little brutality in there too, but we'll get to that in a second. Lupercalia was an ancient pagan Roman festival that was celebrated on February the 15th for purification and fertility, involving sacrifices of goats and a dog, priests smearing bloods on youths' foreheads. Apparently the kids then laughed, I'm not quite sure why, but they did. And near-naked priests running around Rome, striking women with strips of goat hide. And the goat hide was known as February, and hence the name February came from the goat hide that was part of the Lupercalia festival. The rituals performed by priests called Luperci at the Lupercal cave included sometimes chaotic atmospheres, as you can imagine, before the church banned it in the 5th century. And the Catholic Church recognizes several martyrs named Valentine, but the most common stories focused on a priest in Rome during the 3rd century. This Valentine purportedly secretly married Christian couples, often Roman soldiers, in defiance of then Empress Claudius II, who banned marriage for young men, believing that single men made better soldiers. So, Valentine sort of snuck in at night and married the soldiers who found their girlfriends in Gaul and elsewhere. When he was discovered, however, he was imprisoned, and not too surprisingly, was executed on February 14th. And then in 496 AD, Pope Gelasius I established St. Valentine's Day as a feast day, possibly to replace Lupercalia. Probably that had kind of worn out its welcome. And in recent years, St. Valentine was removed, unfortunately, from the Catholic Church's general Roman calendar in 1969, because it turns out there were several St. Valentines, and they couldn't really tell which one they should name it after. And so they just went ahead and took him off the list, and instead replaced him by Saints Cyril and Methodius, who were revealed as the apostles of the Slavs for their missionary work and cultural contributions, most notably developing the first Slavic alphabet and for laying the foundations for Slavic culture and identity. The holiday became linked to romantic love in the Middle Ages, particularly through none other than Geoffrey Chaucer's poetry associating it with the mating of birds in early spring. And the tradition of exchanging handwritten notes and cards or valentines became popular in the 18th century England, and the gift of chocolates in heart-shaped boxes was popularized by none other than the entrepreneur Richard Cadbury in the 1860s. And roses became common gifts as the holiday's commercial and romantic aspects grew. So, now that you know a little bit more about this holiday, our own celebration in 2 weeks should be even more fun. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you.
Let me turn it over to Felix. There you go.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good to see you and see that everybody survived last week weather and bracing yourself for the next one. Quick announcement. The service for Jean Alden has been suspended because of the weather, and we'll give you an update as soon as we get more details. We have a few announcements. I'll start with Alan.
The Valentine's Love Extravaganza is coming together and have some talented people participating, but you'd be amazed at how many people in our club don't sing and don't dance, or at least they say they don't. If we had any people that are not completely tone deaf, we could use a few singers in a group setting, or dancers in a group setting, nothing fancy. Bill? The sign-up deadline is
February 1st, by
Monday?
6, Monday.
Monday. Sign-up deadline is
End of
Monday.
business day.
Monday, and I'm gonna pass this around. If you can sign up and let us know if you're coming.
Yeah.
This will be great for singles or couples. So, we have both coming, and we're gonna make it fun for everybody. But let us know if you're bringing someone. Oh, there's one of each table. Yeah, if you can fill out,
If you have that RSVP.
if you have an RSVP, then you can do it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. And if you have any questions about the online RSVP, you can see Randy after the meeting. Bob Ostrom.
So the blood drive, our first annual blood drive, maybe our last, the way we're going, but it's our first annual, and the registration has been slow. We've had 14 people registered. If I was using a term, I'd probably call it an anemic response. But I will say, I want to give a shout out to those that did register: Alan Young, Christy Jones, Liz Henke, Judy Miller, Linda Sanders, Lorenzo, Tom Giannikos, and Vince Narbut, and our own Debbie Allen from the Sand Yard. So he says he's going, so we'll see what happens. But so it's now WCHL is doing an announcement for us. We're reaching out to the university. So I would just, and for all of you, if you've never given, just talk to some of the people on this list that have given. It's really not a bad deal, and you get Jersey Mike subs out of it too. So if you can do it on March 4th, please go to the website and sign up. If you want a personal invitation, I've got it in my hand, but I'll give you a personal invitation. There you go. Thanks.
And thank you to Rafika. Rafika has placed some information on each table, so you can just take your phone and scan the QR code. Remember, you can save lives just by using the QR code. One more announcement. Okay, Vince.
New service opportunity for those of you who like to pick up trash. March 7th is our target date for our next trash pickup. The usual will be meeting at Estes Hills Elementary, 9 to 12. Sign up sheet, email to follow. Thanks for showing up.
Thank you. No, keep carrying. Thank you, Karen, for that. And with that, I'm gonna call upon Ted to introduce our guest.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Before I bring up our guest, who shares the last name with me, there are two Rotarians, only one of them is in the room, who have a real deep connection with my father. One of them is Jim Hebner, who's not here, and I'll let my dad, Larry, explain to you what the connection with that is when we get up here. And I bet the other person doesn't even know what the connection is that they have. You? Me? No. Christian, do you remember this? Okay. Not really. So Christian and I remember several things. This is obviously an important life moment for Christian. So back in the early days of this century, North Carolina had a basketball season that wasn't going so well. And then lo and behold, the year 2000, we made it to the Final Four, which was wonderful. And I was a sophomore at Carolina, and you were probably a junior that year, or senior? Senior in 2000. So we had the great idea with a few of our fraternity brothers that we would drive to Indianapolis and go to the game, having somehow acquired tickets, but not a hotel room. But these problems have a way of taking care of themselves. So let's just go to Indianapolis, 12 hours, drive through the night, almost fall asleep on the road, pull into the hotel parking lot of, I think it may have been the Team Hotel or something, at 6 a.m., and lo and behold, they did not have any extra rooms, and they were not going to give them to us. Show up at that hour. Fortunately, he was there with my mother on a work trip. He'll tell you all about this. He used to take work trips to things like the Final Four, the World Series. So I said, I think I might have a solution. So we went and knocked on their hotel room door. They let 4 of us go crash on the floor for the weekend. And not only that, Christian came down with some kind of virus, flu or something, and my mother took Christian to the doctor in Indianapolis, Indiana, for the Final Four weekend. So it's been a long time since my dad has seen some of you, many of you, maybe 26 years, maybe a little less, who knows, Freddie little, and some more of you. So my father, who grew up in Charlotte primarily, and went to Carolina, class of 1969, and he went off to New York and worked for the better part of 35 years at Sports Illustrated and Time Inc., and then relocated back to Charlotte almost 7 years ago to the day. I think this week, his 7-year back in North Carolina anniversary, so he's here to tell us all about his life experiences and the new book he wrote. This is my father, Larry Keith. Here we go. All right. If not, you can share mine. This one's got enough power for both of them.
Also, Dick Baddour, Aaron Keck, and all the new friends that I met since arriving.
Yeah.
One fellow was nice enough to say that he remembered stories that I had written in Sports Illustrated so long ago that I've forgotten writing those stories. But that was very nice, and thank you. It's delightful to be here. Also want to thank Jim Hebner. Jim Hebner gave me this tie when I was the New York chairman of the fundraising campaign for Memorial Hall. I'm wearing this in honor of Jim wherever you are at the moment. I owe a special debt of gratitude to Jim Hebner because he did not fire me when I totally botched a Carolina baseball Eastern Regional broadcast, broadcast in Gastonia, North Carolina. I was so bad that Jim drove from Chapel Hill to Gastonia to do the next game. So thank you, Jim, for not letting me go.
That may have been the last game that you broadcast.
That was the last game I broadcast.
Not a coincidence. All right, so you brought, in addition to the book, which is called Touch 'Em All, My Life and Career in Sports Illustrated by Larry Keith, which he'll tell you all about. You brought some goodies over there. If you want to explain some of what's on the
Yeah, there's, I wrote 19 cover stories, and that was given to me when I retired, a picture of all the cover stories that I did. As a, notably, I got to cover the North Carolina, the Final Four in 1979 between Larry Bird and Magic Johnson.
Yeah.
But Tommy Lasorda, Reggie Jackson, Tom Seaver, Those were, I got to, it was a lot of fun hanging out with those guys doing those stories. But more particular to Chapel Hill, when I was a junior, Sandy Treadwell, who had been the sports editor for the Tar Heel the year before me, we met, became quick friends. In fact, Ted's godfather, Sandy Treadwell, we created something called the Carolina Blue Review. And this was a preseason publication about the upcoming 67-68 basketball season. And Dean Smith was good enough to lead the team to the Final Four, but unfortunately he ran into Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I wrote it in the Daily Tar Heel. He traveled 3,000 miles to lose by 7 feet 2 inches. When, speaking of Dean, this is the bicentennial issue of the Carolina Alumni Magazine, and I was privileged really to write a story about Dean Smith and how he was such a class act that inspired not just Carolina athletics, but indeed, I think, the entire university. He was a very special man, and I would be delighted to talk more about him. This is a recognizable person, Michael Jordan. I created the concept for Sports Illustrated for Kids. My focus group at home included my 2 sons at the time, Rob Keith and Ted Keith. And I would seriously ask them what 10, 11, 12-year-old kids would be interested in reading about of the sports nature. And they were really quite helpful. Little did I know that many years later, Ted would start his career at Sports Illustrated for Kids. Well done, Ted. This is a letter that the founder of basketball, James Naismith, wrote to my father when my father was a 14-year-old kid in 1939, asked the inventor of basketball for his autograph. Well, Dr. Naismith was at the University of Kansas, was very kind to write a letter that included obviously his autograph, but of course there's a connection to our own Dean Smith. Dean played for Fog Allen, and Fog Allen learned his basketball at the knee of James Naismith. And speaking of Dean Smith, there's a story. When I covered college basketball as a writer in Major League Baseball, and then when I became the senior editor after 5 years, I became the editor in charge of our coverage. Well, in 1981, I had a very easy decision to make. We were going to rank the top 20 teams in the country. North Carolina was coming off the Final Four championship game. It lost to Indiana, but they had 4 starters back, and they were going to fill that 5th position I just knew by Michael Jordan. Now, Michael Jordan had been the leading scorer in the McDonald's All-Star game the previous spring. So I contacted Coach Smith and said, Coach, we want to pick you number 1. Of course, he never liked to be picked number 1, but they were that good. And I said, we'd like to take a picture of you, the 4 returning starters, and Michael Jordan. It ain't gonna happen. There was a pause. Well, why Michael Jordan? I said, well, he's going to be your 5th starter. No, he's not. I said, well, what are you talking about? I'm explaining basketball to Dean Smith. And he said, well, he hasn't proven himself on defense. I said, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought about that. Well, what are you going to do? He said, well, we're thinking about starting somebody else. He's got to prove himself on defense. Well, we took the cover picture without the 5th starter, Michael Jordan, who was in fact in the starting lineup at the beginning of the season. And not only that, scored the first basket for the Tar Heels. We also know that when the season ended in New Orleans, at Final Four, who made the last basket for the Tar Heels? Michael Jordan. So that's what this stuff is all about. There's a Hall of Fame medal that I wear very proudly. I'm delighted to have been inducted into the North Carolina Journalism Hall of Fame. So, with thanks to you folks, Jim Hendrick told me that this was a very special group, and I have found it to be so. little intimidated, but fortunately I have my son here who's going to guide me through the afternoon.
All right, first we're gonna do a little trivia question. I know at least one person in the room is gonna know this, probably you. So Jordan did score the first basket of the game. We talked about the connections between Dean and Bog Allen, James Naismith. Do you know who the first game was against that season, which was played in Charlotte in the 81-82 season? Who Carolina played when? No, close. Kansas. Whoever said it. Very good. Good job. Dean never wanted to play Kansas, of course, his alma mater, but somehow or another they wound up playing to start the season, and Carolina won that game and then went 32-2. Not bad. All right, so that's a lot of the SI stuff, but how many people in the room here are from Charlotte? I'm just curious. I'm guessing a fair amount. Oh, not as many as I thought might be. All right, so tell them how you sort of arrived in Charlotte and what high school you went to. There was something in the bio about maybe your earliest Carolina basketball connection that endures to this day. I think you know what I'm talking about, right?
Not sure.
What was your first Carolina basketball connection as a senior? You said it was your senior year in high school where you got some new classmates.
Oh, of course. My first, when I started to fall in love with Carolina basketball, I was actually 14 years old. And I listened to a Carolina-Maryland game on the radio. And at that point, I already thought maybe I wanted to be a sports journalist. And so I took out a spiral composition notebook and wrote the game story of this game I just listened to on the radio. I'm guessing Billy Cunningham, but that had been Cunningham's era. But it was almost like being there. Now, what Ted is referring to, and thank you, when South Mecklenburg High School integrated, long overdue, but when it finally integrated in the 1964-65 season, two brothers and a cousin by the name of Davis were among the enrollees. And one of the Davises turned out to be the father of Carolina's current basketball coach, Hubert Davis. There's another little story about that. I think maybe Carolina played, and you were with me, I think, for the game in Charlotte. It was a football game. Carolina, I think, played NC State in Charlotte. And at halftime, I was up in the press box, not covering the game, just freeloading. Sports journalists are excellent, by the way.
So true.
And freeloading. I was in this press box, and there was a gathering of people at halftime, a lot of conversation, a lot of interest going on. And as I got closer, I noticed that Hubert Davis was, of course, the center of attention. He was an NBA star at the time, and it made perfectly good sense. But with Hubert was Hubert's father. So I thought, well, I'm going to play a little trick on this Hubert Davis. So I really sort of nudged my way into the crowd, and I said, I introduced myself as a former high school classmate of Hubert's dad. And of course, people wondered, well, wait, Hubert's the star. I said, no, the star is Hubert's dad. And he was. In fact, the three of them, Harry, Hubert, and Herbert Davis, were terrific basketball players at South Mecklenburg High School.
So before you got to Chapel Hill, you went to UNC Charlotte for a couple of years, right? Which I think was a brand new school at the time.
It was.
Right. But when you finally get to Carolina in the fall of 1967, I know a lot of you went to school at Carolina or grew up in Carolina. What was Chapel Hill like back then, especially for someone who sort of had it on their radar screen as you had for a number of years to finally arrive at the shining city on the hill that Carolina was and is?
I was and everybody here can relate to this, I was a huge Carolina fan. A fan of the basketball team, a fan of the school, but also a fan of the Daily Tar Heel, because after winning a high school sports writing contest, I got a job at the Charlotte News working for Ronald Green, who's the sports editor. And as a sports writer at the News, there were some other young writers at the News, all of whom had worked for the Daily Tar Heel. Pat Stiff was one of them. He won the Pulitzer Prize at the Raleigh News Observer. And they talked about the Daily Tar Heel as if it was Nirvana. And of course, the idea of students putting out a daily newspaper of the great quality which the Daily Tar Heel was and really always has been, totally infatuated me. So, yes, I wanted to go to Carolina. Yes, I wanted to see and be a part of the basketball program as someone covering it, but I really wanted to work for the Daily Tar Heel.
And you did, for a year.
And I did. We won the Best Sports Radio Award for North and South Carolina. And that led to a job. My dad worked in radio. Your grandfather, as you know, worked in radio for many years. And he had always wanted me to go into radio. But I had a face for radio, but I didn't really want to go that route. Lo and behold, I had 2 job offers. Orville Campbell said, come to the Chapel Hill Weekly, you can be our sports editor. And Jim Hebner, who I met both of these gentlemen in the press box at Keenan Stadium, where we ranged. I still remember the fried chicken and gravy, oh my gosh. And Jim offered me a job to be sports director at WCHL. And of course I had, at this point, plenty of print experience, but no radio experience at all. And I thought, well, in consideration and tribute to my dad, I will go to work for Hebner. A steep learning curve. He was a great boss, a great instructor, not very patient. He's the least patient person we've ever met. But
He is watching this live stream.
I know you, Jim. You know I love you, Jim, but you were not the most patient man. But again, when I screwed up big time, what happened when I was covering this baseball tournament, at the end of the inning, you were supposed to cue the radio station back at Chapel Hill to play the commercial break between innings. I'd always forget to look at my watch. I was supposed to be gone for 60 seconds, and it might be 50, it might be a minute and a half. I mean, I couldn't make myself look at the watch. You would have thought, and Jim had every reason to explode and drive before the end of the game, but he let me finish my debacle. And really, truly, he was very nice. He said, well, you blew it. But you got to pay attention to the time. This is radio, it's important. But it worked out fine. My experience working at WCHL, I did the Dean Smith show before and after every game. I did the Bill Dooley show before and after every game. I did 4 sports shows a day, and it was a great experience.
So real quick, so Hebner, some of you might know this, your senior year was 68, 69, and Jim, I think, is a founding member of this Rotary Club. Wasn't that the first year of this Rotary Club? Was 68, 69, or was it 69, 70? It's on his button every time.
68.
68, 69. So he had time to found a Rotary Club and drive to Dale UL. It's an amazing bit of work.
One was a labor of love, one was just something you had to do to get this kid off the air.
In the sense that not everything changes in Chapel Hill, it's changed so much, but some things are the same. I know you have this committed to memory, so I'll put you on the spot. What was what was the line for the sponsor of the pre and post game show for the basketball show?
Well, this is
still
football. The Fitzwater Company Locker Room Scoreboard, the most complete scoreboard show on the radio. Now, how many people listen to the Fitzwater Company Locker Room Scoreboard, the most complete scoreboard show on the radio? I said that back 10 times an hour.
And it's still here.
It's still here. I still remember it. It rings in my ear.
So you went off to New York, and then you had some Tar Heel help for getting to New York. Carolina, just one big happy family. Tar Heels always looking out for Tar Heels, right? I know there's some Duke people here. Do you all do that for each other at Duke, or is it just everybody's out for themselves? I can't, yeah. Carolina, we look out for each other. So you got some help getting to Carolina from a DTH predecessor. And they might know this guy.
Well, Curry Kirkpatrick had graduated in 65. He distinguished himself. He was a terrific writer. And someone asked me earlier about Curry. He's alive and well in Hilton Head, South Carolina. I'm sure you would send his regards. He is a true Tar Heel basketball fan, especially even cheering in the press box. The sign, no cheering in the press box. Curry would let loose the occasional yelp and howl, and it was a little embarrassing if you're trying to play it straight, you'd be sitting beside him, but it's such a great writer. I don't disparage Duke folks as much as my son Ted and what? And the people in my Carolina chat group. I'm in a chat group with people, and there seldom is heard an encouraging word about the Duke Blue Devils. But the reason I have no bone to pick with Duke is that when I was a senior at Carolina, Curry, I'm sure this was Curry's doing, got the magazine to invite me, or to assign me really, to do the scouting report on Duke for the 1968-69 college basketball issue. Now, for a college kid, you can imagine what a thrill. I don't think they paid me, now that I think about it. But I did. I did the scouting report on Duke, went to Duke Indoor Stadium, interviewed the coach, the players. Would that have been Bucky Waters?
No, Bubis was still there. Big Bubis was
Whoever
still
it was. I have forgotten parts of it because it's kind of sits heavy on my heart to know that I owe Duke so much. Because without Duke and doing that scouting report, that was a great entree in Sports Illustrated.
So got to SI in 1970, and became a writer in 1975, and this book is chock full of the journey of stories that not only he wrote, but the stories sort of behind the story, some of which I alluded to in the little bio right up there, but there were a couple that I want to ask you about in particular because it'll lead to some questions I have about really what we spent last night talking about after watching this documentary on the 1993 Tar Heels that aired on the ACC network, which was wonderful.
Yeah, really.
And then we spent the next 45 minutes arguing about the modern state of college athletics, which I was going to do now, but we don't have nearly as much time, so we'll just pretend none of you are here and continue the argument. But one of the stories we alluded to there was the one with Reggie Jackson, who became a frequent subject of the magazines and of yours on the baseball beat in the 1970s, who was the first, when he came to the New York Yankees for the 1977 season, he was not the first official free agent, but he was the first huge money free agent. And he was not shy about telling people that he had a lot of money, including you.
Well, yeah, I was, as you'll notice, the covers, probably more baseball covers up there than basketball. And one of them was Reggie, and I was at the Yankee, in the Yankee locker room, and I'll never forget, I hadn't met him, I wanted to approach him, and I said, he was sort of walking away, I didn't want to lose him. I said, Reggie, and of course, he ignored me. Reggie, he ignored me. Larry Keith, he ignored me, of Sports Illustrated. Turn on a dime. Comes over, puts his arm around me. What can I do for you? That's Reggie. And not only that, he said, what can I do for you? I said, well, I'm really here to do what we hope will be a cover story on you. He said, right this way. And he led me into the trainer's room. Well, those of you, Freddie knows this. Media's not allowed in the training room. I mean, that's the Cytorus. You cannot go in there. But for Reggie and his writer from Sports Illustrated, there we were. There's a postscript. After the game, now I have to go on a road trip with the Yankees to develop the story. We get on the airplane, and we're walking down the aisle trying to find two seats together. And Reggie sees some guy. I didn't recognize him as a player. I don't know who he was, but he had a seat. He was comfortably sitting there.
It was not Billy Martin.
It was not Billy Martin. There were so many stories about Billy Martin, you can tell. And Reggie goes up to him and says, hey, you gotta move. You gotta move. I got a guy here from Sports Illustrated. I'm gonna sit here. And the guy's, what? So, okay, Mr. Jackson. He gets up, moves. Reggie sits down, sticks his hand in his pocket, pulls out a wad of bills that would choke a horse, and starts counting. I don't know who was more impressed. I mean, I was just so delighted to see Reggie Jackson showing me his bankroll.
Yeah, that's pretty good access. But sometimes you had to do a little bit more digging, be a little bit more industrious to get to a story. So when you wanted to speak to, for example, Larry Bird, famously reluctant with the media. You got creative about getting to the source of who Larry Bird really was, and that also had problems.
The funny thing is, Larry Bird has since become, I wouldn't call him articulate. I mean, he's still a hick from French Lick. But he will talk, and he's funny, and he's clever, and he's a terrific interview today. Then, he did not want to talk to the media at all. But I had a plan. I knew exactly what to say to him to break through this protective barrier that he put up. I said, Larry, I said, we all know about you as a player. We know your statistics, we know your background, but people want to know what you are like. What are your interests? What motivates you? And he had a very definite answer to that. I don't want to talk about it. I said, uh-oh, I am up the creek here without a paddle. So, trying to be an industrious reporter, I did the next best thing. I called his mother. It is not hard to find a Bird to call in French Lick, Indiana. You just call, what's the Bird residence? And she was delightful. We had a wonderful interview. She told me that the entire town of French Lick was very upset that Larry wasn't leading the country in scoring. And that became the lead to my story. Well, Bird heard, I guess his mother told me, you won't believe who called me today, Larry. This guy from Sports Illustrated, he was so nice. And of course, Larry did not like it at all. And when I saw him the next day, spending several days with the team, he was very, very upset about it. He said, you shouldn't have called my mother, you shouldn't have involved her. And I said, Larry, she loved talking about you. You're her son. You're a success. She's proud of you. But it didn't go down well with Larry Bird.
That's okay. So actually, I'm going to get you to give a quick story about, not everything was glamour and excitement. There were a lot of, I know, lonely nights in hotel rooms trying to write stories and get them filed to the best of your ability. And then there were times where the athletes were decided to have a little fun with you sometimes, from time to time. Were you or not able to meet the world's strongest man?
I did meet the world's strongest man. At least he was identified as such. He was the trainer for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And in a lot of bad things happened in training. Carl Yastrzemski once saw me in the Boston locker room, and he said, who are you? What are you doing here? I said, hey, I'm Larry Keane, Sports Illustrated, here to do a story. This particular occasion is the Pittsburgh dressing room. And one of the players says to me, he said, hey, you might enjoy this. You want to meet the world's strongest man? And I said, well, sure. He said, well, believe it or not, he's our trainer, Tony Barterone. And I said, well, fine. I said, why is he the world's strongest man? He said, he can take a phone book and rip it in half. And I said, come on, that's a Carl trick. That's nothing. He said, well, he does some other things too. Tony, come out here and show this man from Sports Illustrated how you're the world's strongest man. Well, Tony came out and he said, okay, here's what I want to do, because I want to prove to you that I'm the world's strongest man. He said, pick out any two players in the locker room. Well, I picked out Bill Robinson and Dave Parker. Both 6+ footers, both over 200 pounds. I was looking for Stargell, but he wasn't around.
Oh my God.
And the idea was that I would lie down between the two of them. We would lock arms and lock legs, and he, Tony Barterone, would grab me by the belt and lift the three of us. Well, what an idiot I was to believe that. Here I am, swaying between these two guys. The entire Pittsburgh Pirate team, you'd think they'd have something better to do, came at me with their shaving cream. Emptied their shaving cream all over me. The world's strongest man, the world's biggest fool.
So we'll do a couple more minutes here, because in case you guys have questions, and you can ask him about this sort of Walter Mitty thing, where if you're around sports long enough, you get to see a lot of great moments. And there's a great moment that happened in sports between the maybe even early 70s and the early 90s or something like that. There's like a 50-50 chance that he would have been there to see it. But I do want to ask you a little bit. So we talked about the Reggie being a free agent and Larry Bird being, I don't know if some of you know this, Larry Bird started his college basketball career at Indiana and went home after about a month from being homesick. He was essentially a free agent at that point. and then eventually wound up at Indiana State, little tiny Indiana State, which has a beautiful color for their basketball uniform, and took them to the
Carolina Blue.
Carolina Blue, and took them to a national championship game undefeated. So at the time, a big money contract in baseball that Reggie got was 5 years, a little under $3 million total. At the time, a player of Larry Bird's caliber being in the transfer portal, would not have lasted more than 10 seconds, and God knows how much money he could have gotten. So you saw the beginning of free agency come to professional sports, and now it has come to collegiate sports. This is something that we talk about quite a bit in relation to, I don't know, there are no parents of current basketball players here, I hope. There's some players who are earning every dollar, and God bless them, I hope they come back, and some maybe not quite so much. What is your view of how college athletics in particular has changed as money has come into it? Having seen the arc of the Dean Smith story, who prioritized a certain value and a certain ethic in college sports that probably no longer exists, are we worse off because that's not part of the landscape anymore?
Well, Tim and I don't agree on this at all. I am very old school, and I think I'm being proven every day to be correct. Every day there's a new scandal, a new controversy. Most recently, just down the road at Duke, their quarterback, who they're counting on, says, "Yes, I'm coming back, coach." At literally the last possible moment, reneges on his obligation to do, goes into the portal, and now he's going to play at Miami. The quarterback, he's succeeding at Miami, Carson Beck, formerly of Georgia, was interviewed after their great season, lost the championship game to Indiana. I didn't know they played football in Indiana.
It's new, huh?
Yeah. I remember the reporter wanted to get, up close and personal with Carson Beck. He said, "Well, Carson, away from football, now the season's over, you've got classes, you've got school. Oh, tell us about, what classes are you taking?" He said, "I don't take any classes. I don't go to school. I just play football for $4 million a year." But he does drive a Lamborghini. Yeah, so he did that.
But there were players, even when you were covering college athletics back then, who were not doing everything above board.
No, I understand. None of this was at Carolina, of course. Some of you may be responsible for what was happening in Carolina. I did an investigation after Kentucky beat Duke for the national championship in 1978. The magazine turned me loose. I was supposed to go from basketball to baseball. And they said, "Take as much time as you want, talk to as many people, go whatever, do whatever, do. Let's get to the bottom of the Kentucky program." And I thought I got to the bottom of the Kentucky program. Talked to Seth Hancock at Claiborne Farms. I thought I got the inside skinny on Kentucky basketball. Just happens to be,
Which was what, essentially? What was, you can say it now, statute of limitations.
well, I mean, for instance, Jeff Ruland's mother, a woman named not Gloria Swanson, that was a movie star, but her name was Swanson. She ran a bar out on Long Island, and she gave me a lot of great detail about the specific recruiting practices that Kentucky employed to get her son, Jeff, to go to Kentucky. Well, Jeff didn't go to Kentucky because they were recruiting his mother and not him. And he wound up going to Iona and being a great college basketball player. When Mrs. Ruland, Swanson, was contacted by the fact checker, every story is fact checked. Ted's stories were fact checked, my stories were fact checked. She told the fact checker that, "Well, I don't feel good about this. They've been to see me and they're going to sue me and one thing and another." Of course, I explained to her that this story would result in her getting a lot of pressure put on her by Kentucky. Well, Kentucky got to her before the story came out, which was the smart thing to do. And without Mrs. Swanson, the at the time, managing editor, Gil Rogan, didn't feel comfortable. I understood it. There was other stuff in the story, but not quite as compelling as the detail that she provided. And he killed the story. I was at home celebrating son Rob's birthday when I got the call from the executive editor of the magazine saying, you know, that cover story after all those months of work that you did, it's not going to run now. Well, the last laugh was two things. The Louisville Courier-Journal did a story, which was pretty much the same story that I had done, and won the Pulitzer Prize. Won the Pulitzer Prize, thank you very much. That cover, which was a picture of a basketball net stuffed with $100 bills, that was going to be the cover of the Kentucky investigation, wound up, when I became a senior editor, wound up as the cover for the Boston College point shaving scandal.
Which was led by,
Henry Hill.
better known as, the main character in
The Goodfellas.
main character in Goodfellas.
Yeah, the writer of Goodfellas, of the book, which became the movie Goodfellas, he also wrote a screenplay. It was a guy named Nick Pileggi who happened to be married to a reporter at then writer at Sports Illustrated. And so he called, and this is before the book's written, he said, Larry, you've had dealings with Henry Hill. And I said, yes. As a matter of fact, how I met Henry Hill was the writer I signed to the story, the expose of the Boston College point shaving scandal, was Doug Looney. We went to the Federal Strike Force office in Brooklyn to get the lawyer and Henry Hill to sign a contract agreeing that he would tell the story for which we paid him $10,000. That was a lot of money those days. You wouldn't be able to get it done today for that much. And so they signed the contract. Now, Symbols told the FBI guys that we were insurance salesmen, that we were just getting Henry Hill's signature on an insurance contract. That wasn't the case. But he did the story with our writer, and it became a sensation. And the cover was the cover that should have run years before on my Kentucky investigation.
And Robert De Niro played you in the movie.
Robert De Niro. That would have been nice. There was no room in the casting for that.
All right, so there's about 10 minutes left. I don't know if anyone has any questions. We did not get yet to one of the subjects I was going to raise, which was the declining state of media. I don't know if did any of you, just show hands, subscribe to Sports Illustrated back in the glory days? That's awesome. Did any of you subscribe to Sports Illustrated in 2017 when I left working there? You already dropped your subscription. Yeah. So by the time I left, it was going from 49 issues a year to 38 to 26. Now it's 12, and they even missed an issue. I don't know if my kids even know it still exists in the world. But anyway, it was a big deal for a while. Between my mother, him, and myself, one of us worked there for 51, I think, consecutive years. So that was sort of the family business. But the media world doesn't exist that way anymore, doesn't operate that way anymore, sadly. He got out at exactly the right time, by the way.
I was
really timed it perfectly.
I confess, I got a golden horseshoe.
Yeah, but so if anyone has any questions about the state of sports, state of media, state of
Well,
college
maybe
athletics,
Dean Smith. Maybe I was a little bit about Dean.
well, you should. I mean, you can tell them real quick what your. Well, actually, tell them the story about. So when Carolina won the national championship in 2009, Dean had a great quote to you. I think did I sign that story or somebody else? Somebody else did. But you wrote about Carolina winning the national championship, and Dean had something to say afterward about Roy and how proud he was of Roy Williams and what he'd accomplished in his first 6 years.
Oh, right. This was, everybody, when it was Roy's first national championship, and everybody wanted to know what Dean Smith thought about it.
Second. 09 was the second.
09 was the second. Was that the year that?
Detroit.
Yes, okay. Dean, as a matter of fact, Dean's daughter was dating a Michigan State player. This is Dean Duncan. Yeah, who's dating, not a player, Michigan State grad, while Carolina was playing Michigan State for the national championship. And of course, everybody was interested in what Dean might have to say if Carolina won. And speaking to Linnea, I was able to get her permission to call Dean after the game to get those impressions from him about the game, obviously only if they won. And Linnell wasn't happy with the fact that I edited the swimsuit issue. She told me, she said, you shouldn't be involved in the swimsuit issue. But for this, she agreed to let me have access to Dean. And as she described it, he sat in a room to watch the game with a old-fashioned television, not a big screen television at all, but it was sort of, and there was no memorabilia in the room, no Carolina memorabilia. As a matter of fact, when he was the Sportsman of the Year, that cover over there, the amphora that the magazine presented to him as Sportsman of the Year, someone later found hidden in a closet, in the back of the closet. But Dean was extremely proud, as you might imagine, of Roy's accomplishments as the national championship winning coach. And he told me how that's why we brought Roy back to Carolina for. Well, the same day, coincidentally, or maybe the day before, that same weekend, was the basketball Hall of Fame induction for Michael Jordan, coincidentally. And Michael said, people think I'm a great basketball player, but they don't know that everything I learned about basketball came from Dean Smith. Yeah. Well, that was in the story also. I wasn't going to lose those two great quotes. So sharing that moment after the fact with Dean Smith, hearing his thoughts about Roy and about Michael, that was very special.
Anyone got any questions they want to ask? Real quick. Yeah, Lorenzo?
Actually, not a question.
Go ahead.
Real quick, but you mentioned Jeff Fruland's story and his going to Iona. I grew up 10 minutes from it. I heard a story from former ACC ref of Italian descent who was friendly with Valvano. And the story went that he went to recruit Jeff Fruland in New Rochelle and knocked on the door, and his grandmother answered the door, and Coach Valvano said, "Hi, I'm Jimmy Valvano. I own a college." Said, "You own a college? Come on in."
I actually did a story on Jimmy Valvano. What a character.
Any truth to that?
I'm sorry?
Any truth to that story?
I don't know. That was, he was early in his days at Iona.
Lorenzo, go ahead.
Yeah, so just as a little background, I've known Ted for a while as a club member and knew he was in sports journalism. And then I show up here and I read the bio of the gentleman who's speaking today, and I said, well, this is really cool. Maybe Ted will get a chance to meet him.
Yeah.
But there's a second story here. I'm interested, Ted, in how you followed in your dad's footsteps, or, you know, was this obvious? Did you want to do other things as a young person? And was it something you know?
I'll let Ted answer, but there's a video of Ted, what are you, 12 years old?
Never seen it.
Oh, we had it. 12-year-old Ted Keith saying that he wants to be a writer at Sports Illustrated.
So, yeah.
Well, in college, Ted knew every stat,
Yeah.
a lot of baseball.
A lot of baseball.
But anything, we would just chat about sports, and Ted's like, "Oh, from the 1992 team, this guy did this."
We call him Ted Bot.
So much. Yeah.
But I only know, I'm fluent in sports and nothing else in life is terrible. Are you guys teachers? I'm sure a bunch of you are, no teachers. Okay, so I had a teacher when I was in 5th grade that said, you know, I had to do book reports and whatever, I happened to read about sports and do that, or no, this was in high school actually, 9th grade. He said, "You're a really good writer. Have you ever thought about being a sports writer?" And obviously it occurred to me, because of him. But loving sports and loving writing and being good at both, I felt, yeah, why not? I can do this. Sports Illustrated will exist forever. I should definitely try and go work there. And it worked out for the first 15 years of my career, and then I'm Sports Business Journal and now at a different place. But yeah, sports is super fun, writing is fun, journalism is fun, storytelling is fun. So no, I never really gave a whole lot of thought to doing something else. I honestly, I come to this lunch and I see how many accomplished people there are here, and I'm flattered that everyone is impressed with sports and likes sports and wants to ask me about sports, but I promise you I'm way more impressed with the rest of you who have much more substantive careers than being in sports journalism, I can promise you. So that's the answer.
I think they just want to hang out with Freddie Hart.
Yeah.
Two quick questions. One, did I actually hear you say you killed the swimsuit issue?
No, I edited the swimsuit issue. One year, Kathy Ireland was on the inside, and Paulina Porcello was on the outside. Can I tell you, Kathy, I was
Yeah, 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Carol, my wife and I, when I was editorial projects director, a whole different life from what we've been talking about here. But my wife and I, as part of the job, a terrible job, went to the Final Four, the 85 the Derby, the Super Bowl, the World Series, the U.S. Open. It was a great job. We took cruises, the sports afloat cruises. We went to 8 Olympics, 7 Olympics. Tough work. I lost my train of thought.
The swimsuit issue, did you try and kill it?
So the Barcelona Olympics, we're flying back after the Olympics. Sports Illustrated charter plane has to make a fuel stop in Shannon Island. Now, from there, you know, there's just one big shopping mall. That's what Shannon Island is. Kathy Ireland was on the plane with us. She was a guest. Very sweet girl, very nice girl, and also very successful businesswoman. I got off the plane and bought a card, Greetings from Ireland. Got back on the plane, asked Kathy to sign it to our son, Rob, who had a big poster of Kathy Ireland in his room. Well, you know what's coming next. She signed the card, Love and Kisses, Kathy Ireland, with a big heart. Really played it up for all his work. I guess you were too young to be interested in girls at the time, but Rob was. Rob was. And so when we got home, I said, Rob, I've got something for you. He said, oh, great, Dad, what'd you get? I said, look at this greeting card. It's a postcard from Ireland. What? Big deal? I said, no, now look on the other side. The other side said, Rob, love and kisses, Kathy Ireland. He loved it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Real quick, there's a bunch of books over here if anybody's interested and they want to buy one or get signed.
Thank you, buddy.